Well, what I'm going to talk to you about today is this idea of massive, open, online courses. And when I usually give this talk, I call it The Promises and Perils of Online Education, but a more pragmatic title is it really possible to teach 40,000 students at once? And as you see, as I get into discussion of some of the enrollment numbers and some of the challenges and I think opportunities provided by this format, you'll see what I mean. But anyways, to MOOC or not to MOOC, the promises and perils of online education. Here are some of the main points I want to hit on today. I want to start with pointing out, and this may seem really obvious to you, but MOOCs, massive open online courses, are only one aspect of online or video teaching. Now that seems obvious, except that oftentimes when you hear people reacting against these MOOC classes, these online courses that have 40 or 50,000, sometimes as many as 70, maybe 100,000 students in them, and they're reacting against all online learning as if it were one of these MOOCs. And so the thing starts to get kind of confused, and it's good to keep it kind of straight and have that pointed out. There's much confusion on this point. I've even found in magazines, for example, like a journal like the Chronicle of Higher Education, there will be a criticism leveled about a MOOC course, something like that. And it's like sometimes they keep getting it messed up in their head that they don't know the difference between online learning, which can include a class of only 15 or 20 students, with lots of homework, with lots of discussion, with lots of different kinds of things. They confuse that with the idea of 50,000 students flung all around the globe, none of whom really have any real interaction with the professor. So they're very different kinds of things. But I'm going to talk about the MOOC today. I'm going to talk about the designing and teaching of a MOOC. Who are the students for these courses? How many? Where do they come from? Are MOOCs effective? If so, at what? And I think that's an interesting question, because what you might think they're effective at or ineffective at I think there's a lot to be drawn from that question. Do MOOCs threaten conventional courses? And this is, in university circles anyway, something that comes up over and over and over again. The idea that these massive online courses are somehow going to replace regular teaching, so that universities are going to go to credit-bearing big courses like this, and they're going to be able to teach tons of students at the same time. Faculty members are going to lose their jobs. You know, there's a lot of fear and pushback against MOOCs at the college level because of that. And I think most of those fears are the fears that are articulated are unfounded, but there are other fears that we should have that don't get articulated so often. And finally, the future of MOOCs and online learning. So let's dive right in and talk a little bit about the University of Rochester's experience with MOOCs. At the time we entered into the MOOC business, there were three primary organizations who were offering these massive open online courses. The one that we joined was Coursera. If you go to coursera.org, you'll see there, if you haven't done yet, tons and tons of free courses on numbers of different topics. If you haven't checked it out, you might really enjoy it. In fact, this group is actually, in many ways, the kind of target audience for these MOOCs, far more than my undergraduates or your middle school and high school students. But there's two other groups at the time who were involved in it. Udacity, also sort of based in the San Francisco area, coming out of Stanford, and then the MIT and Harvard collaboration called edX. And so those are really the three big groups. Of course, everybody knows about the University of Phoenix. Maybe you know something about the Khan Academy. A lot of these people are offering online courses, some for credit, some not for credit. In the case of Udacity and Coursera, these courses are not for credit. Students do not pay anything. They also do not get any college credit for being there. They are, for all intents and purposes, education/entertainment in a certain kind of way. And I'll get into that in just a minute. Anyway, this was not the U of R's first foray into online learning. We have online and hybrid courses that we've been running for years now. A very effective one is a master's degree that students can get through the School of Nursing. This is fantastic for people who are working nurses who have got full-time schedules and need to be able to take a course. It's fantastic for them to be able to do that and do the lectures on their own schedule, and then every couple of weeks or every month they'll come in and actually have discussions and workshops with the faculty. And class is very small, 15, 20, that kind of thing, so it's controllable. It's not the kind of gigantic, how do you grade all these papers kind of thing. So we've been doing that for a while. The filming for my first class, The History of Rock, began in March 2013. Some of you who know me know that I have a History of Rock textbook with W.W. Norton that's very popular. It's the top-selling book in the college market. And so the idea was to turn this popular book and this course that I've been teaching for years into an online course. We thought it would have a lot of appeal. So we started filming The History of Rock in March in 2013, and the course launched in May of that year, part 1. We were told, and I'll get to this in the next slide, that the best way to organize a 13 or 14-week class is to break it up. People don't, after about 6 or 7 weeks, you really start to lose folks in a MOOC like this. But if you break it up into a 7-week course followed by a 6-week course, somehow more people stick with it. Who knows what the psychology of that is? Some other things about organized material that the people at Coursera found out that's very interesting. Anyway, part 1 launched in May of 2013. So parts 1 and 2 ran May through August, right against each other, one after the other in 2013. Then when we repeated them in September and December of 2013. And we're currently in our third run. We just finished History of Rock Part 1 a couple of weeks ago, the third time through, and it will start up, the Part 2 will start up in September. So we'll have run it 3 times by the time we get to the end of the year. I launched a course, The Music of the Beatles. A third MOOC was launched on February 2014. That repeated on, we're repeating it right now. It started on July the 6th, and it will repeat again September 2014. Those of you who are Beatles fans will know the significance of the dates that I launched this course. Sunday, February the 9th, 2014 at 8 p.m. was the launch of the Beatles class for the first time, which of course is exactly the time the Ed Sullivan Show started 50 years earlier. The July 6th date was chosen because that's exactly 50 years after the premiere of A Hard Day's Night. I haven't figured out what my tie-in's going to be in September, although it might have something to do with the fact of the Beatles being exposed to marijuana for the first time, but I don't know if that's going to play very well in all quarters, but that's actually about the time that happened for those of you who are interested in that kind of thing. Designing and teaching of the course, as I said before, a course should not exceed 7 weeks. These folks at Coursera have done a lot of this, a lot of research. Remember, Coursera is primarily driven by science people, so they love the data. And they've analyzed the data and figured out this is the best way to keep people. They've also figured out that individual lectures on these should not last longer than 12 minutes, which means that you can still do 90 minutes of lecture, but they have to be divided up into chunks. People will begin to doze off after 10 minutes of one of these kinds of things. You can keep them a little bit longer when you're talking about music, but remember, a lot of these courses are about computer programming and various kinds of very sort of nuts and boltsy kind of science things. So it's better to chunk them out. So what ends up happening is each week's video run about 90 minutes, but they're divided up into these 10, 12-minute chunks, and so you get 9, 10, maybe 11 different videos that students watch. With quizzes that pop up, you can put a quiz anywhere in the video you want to, even just an obvious quiz. So if you've just been making a big point, you can insert into the video at some point, what I just said was blah, 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 true or false. And it has a way of sort of waking people up so they don't kind of doze off. Well, we all do it. You go into entertainment mode and you doze off. And what did it just say for the last 3 or 4 minutes? This kind of thing. So here's the deal. No music can be used in one of these courses. You could, but what you would be risking is that the copyright holder would come after you. So from a pragmatic point of view, the way we decided it was, if we get a letter from the lawyers at Sony telling us we're using some music and we need to cease and desist, what our lawyers at the University of Rochester are going to do is say, well, we don't know if it's fair use or not, but we're going to suspend the class until we find out. Well, you may as well just kill it, right? So the idea is if that could happen, and it could, because fair use is litigated, right? If somebody accuses you of it, they can be absolutely wrong, and you will win, but you can go broke winning because they got the lawyers and you don't have the lawyers. So you just don't want to get into that. You don't want to trip that wire. So I thought, how can you run a music course without there being any music? Well, silly me. We live in the world of the internet and the worldwide interweb. And it turns out that the students had absolutely no problem finding all of the music. I mean, we thought within 24 hours we'd have to respond to this. You know, somebody posted something on one of the message boards like about an hour into the course, and in about an hour and 10 minutes later, somebody already had all the tunes like on a playlist, or a Spotify playlist. Remember, we're talking about an international crowd here, so the people who couldn't get things in various kinds of countries or territories. So somebody posted all the music on a server in Russia where they don't care about copyright, you know. So of course, who knows what kind of malware you get by going there. But nevertheless, the idea was that the music was immediately available, and I need not have worried. And in fact, this thing that we're talking about here, not using the music, is widely supported as best practice among university people who are involved with online learning. So you got to watch out, especially when you're dealing with international licensing. You can have a link to YouTube that works just fine in the United States, but you got a student in Spain or maybe somewhere in Eastern Europe who's saying, you know, we can't get it here. It's blocked in our country.
When you teach the history of rock and roll class directly to students here at U of R, do you play without music in the classroom?
I do, and there's no problem with that. In fact, we have all the music is available to students behind a password-protected site on Blackboard. And so our lawyers figure that's we own all the recordings, so it's an extension of our ownership privileges. We also have a BMI, ASCAP, and CSAC licenses and these kinds of things. So we figured we're covered from a couple of different directions. But it's not for open use. You have to be enrolled in the course. You have to be able to get into it that way. And when they're no longer enrolled in the course shuts down. And it's streaming only, no downloading.
Do you have to police the message boards if people post links to servers? I mean, is that?
Well, that's Coursera's problem. Right? So Coursera provides the platform. So whatever happens on the forum, whatever, you know, in the forums that are involved in these courses, that really comes down to Coursera, and they seem not to care about links. If something's on the internet, you can link to it. The person who's in trouble is the person who posted it in the first place, right? And you don't want to be the one who's responsible for having posted it. So if I would play music like I normally do in class and say, okay, now look, we're getting to the chorus here. Do you hear how this is? You can't do that because we would be presenting that content. We would be responsible for the copyright violation. So it created a kind of a real limitation, I thought, but it turned out that it wasn't as much as I thought. Now, as we just said, the Coursera site provides discussion forums. I thought when you started getting into that question, what you might have been starting to say is, do you have to police the forum? Because these forums can sometimes become real snake pits, especially when you're dealing with popular music. It's like people arguing about baseball. Everybody believes they're an expert, and before you know it, people are they're criticizing each other, and it can get real ugly. At least that's what I've heard about some of these others. But I have to say, my Coursera students are enormously self-policing. So when somebody says something that's sort of out of bounds or criticizes a previous poster or something, the others all downmark them, because you can downmark somebody with a minus or red mark, you know. And that person, it's like they're running them out of the room. You know, in no time at all they'll have minus 20 or something. They'll be like, hey, what did I say? I didn't mean anything, you idiots. You know, it's always somebody who doesn't get why it's a problem, you know. But nevertheless, this is what goes on. And it's in fact, I will tell you that of all the things that I could think of about this course that would have been a problem, it turned out I was wrong about almost all of them. And that it's mostly because people are just basically dedicated to the course, dedicated to the material, and dedicated to treating one another with respect. And you know, of course, if the course is going well and they're enjoying the lectures, there's one kind of vibe. If your course is full of bugs and they constantly feel like they're being frustrated because they're trying to learn, but something about the technology or something about what's going on is not right, then you're going to get a lot more crankiness. So maybe because they were enjoying the material, I got a little bit less of that. Let's talk a little bit about what goes into producing one of those courses. There are three of us on the team here that puts together myself, Will, who's videoing back there, and today, who does all the camera work and all the editing, and then Eric Fredrickson, who is our vice president in charge of IT and these kinds of things. The three of us together, we sat down and figured out how many hours we put into this, because that's what everybody wants to know. How long did it take you to do one of these things? Well, History of Rock Part 1 had 62 videos. Remember, each of them 10 or 12 minutes in length. And then Part 2 had 54 videos for 116 videos total. Part 1 had 3 quizzes and a final, so for a 7-week class, every 2 weeks there's a quiz. At the end of the 7th week, there's a final that incorporates the quiz for week 7. Part 2 had 2 quizzes and a final, one after 2, one at 4, and then a final at 6 that incorporates the last quiz. In hours, I figured out I probably put in 158 hours working on those 2 classes together. And Will and Eric probably put in excess of 300 hours. So we're closing in on 500 hours to run this online course. And what I always say is this is not recommended for junior faculty. In other words, when you're a full professor, you don't really have to worry about certain kinds of publication things. It isn't such a big pressing thing. You can afford to take this kind of time. But somebody just starting out in their career, this is a lot of work to get involved in it. The other thing about doing videos that's very different from doing articles or textbooks or things like this is that a video is very difficult to edit errors in. So if you don't get it right when you put it on video, it really means going back and having to re-record an entire segment where you're wearing the same stuff, you're here, and it has to kind of blend in and all that. It's not like sort of fixing something in Microsoft Word where you can say, oh, I just got that date wrong, And listen, if you don't get this stuff right, these people, they're into it, man. They will flag you on it. They'll be right there and saying, and it undercuts your credibility if you don't get it right. So what I did doing these lectures is I gave myself detailed notes with all the facts on file on a music stand that was just out of the camera's view. And as I talked through, nothing was on a teleprompter, so I was basically lecturing like I'm lecturing now, but I had this over here to the side. So when I would mention dates and chart positions and things like that, it would all be there, and I will have fact-checked them before so that I'd be able to avoid just kind of doing it off the top of my head, which I often do when I'm teaching the regular class. If I'm teaching a group like this, somebody's got their computer and I'll say, I don't remember whether that was 63 or 64. Google that, will you? And that person will, and a minute later they'll say, oh, that was 63. Okay, thank you very much. And that seems okay in this kind of context. But online you can't do that. It looks like you don't know what you're talking about. Why should we listen to this person if they don't know whether it's 1963 or 1964? So you got to be ready. Let me tell you a little bit about the students, and we'll get to the enrollments in just a minute, which are just, there's a great David Crosby line about playing Woodstock, and he says, when they played Woodstock in 1969, you look out, and there are all those people, and you can't even comprehend how many people are out there. He says, you just kind of go, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, many. And that's kind of the way it is with these kinds of enrollments, just staggering. We found that with the rock classes, we have a relatively even gender split, which is significant at Coursera, which skews very, very strongly in terms of male users. We found out that the crowd was overwhelmingly international. 65 to 70% of the people who took and take my MOOC classes are outside of the United States of America. Most of them are well educated. 65% of them have either an earned bachelor's, master's, or PhD. I have faculty members at other schools who are taking the MOOC, right, and who are emailing me. I guess I'm most flattered by the fact that Rand Blake from the Berkeley School, famous jazz pianist, is a big fan of my classes, and in fact even offered to post a couple of tracks of Beatles tunes to the whole class of his sort of interpretations of them. So that's very gratifying. The college-age U.S. students are in the minority. The number of students between the ages of 18 and 25 who live in the United States are a very small percentage of the people who enroll in these classes, less than 20%. And you might say, well, why is that? Well, look, they're in college. Why would they take another course online that they don't have to, that doesn't count for credit? But it tells you something. Whenever somebody says, oh, these MOOCs, they're going to replace conventional courses. No, you don't understand. When one of these things works, it's not because it's targeted at American college-age kids or high school-age kids. It's because it's targeted at people who are 30, 40, 50-something, who already have a lot of education, who delight in the idea of learning about things. These are people who are not just taking my MOOC, but they're taking a lot of different MOOCs. And they're doing these courses the way people catch up on binge watch Breaking Bad on Netflix or something like that. I mean, I'm not nearly as exciting as Walter White, but I'm saying there is this sense of sort of getting into it because you're sort of into the whole kind of MOOC thing. And that's the crowd really that you get here. Now, let's have a look at the numbers real quick, and because this is so small, I've given you that extra sheet for you to take a look at here. I'll show you how to read these numbers as we go, and why don't I just point to what's up here, and then you can look at what you've got down there. Going across here, you've got the total raw enrollments for each of the courses, starting with History of Rock Part 1 the first time, then the second time, History of Rock Part 1 the second time, History of Rock Part 2 the second time, the Beatles, History of Rock Part 1 the third time, here's History of Rock Part 2 the third time. That hasn't started yet, so the numbers there are very, very incomplete. And the Beatles class, which is so. If you go across and you come to the final number that's boxed at the end here, we've had 192,372 people enroll in these courses since we started in May of 2013. Now, of those people who enrolled, how many ever actually show up for the course and do anything? So what happens with an enrollment is they see the little introductory thing on Coursera. They say, hey, maybe they watch the little intro video that I do 2 or 3 minutes to kind of sell the course. They say, hey, that's pretty awesome. I'll enroll in it. It doesn't cost you anything to enroll, no problem. You've already got an account. And then maybe they never show up again. So it's a little bit like getting a like on a Facebook page or a Facebook post. Somebody went, oh, that's kind of cool, and they hit the button, and that's all that really happens there. How many of them actually show up? Well, that's the second column across the way, and you can see that broken down by course, but over the course of the time, up through the present day, as of like 9:30 last night, there were 120,330 who'd shown up. When students go to the site, they can either stream the videos like you would on YouTube, or they can download them. And in terms of copyright, we own the copyright on those videos, but we kind of given up on having any control. We're just giving them away. They're like business cards for the University of Rochester. I'll talk about that in just a minute. So in terms of streaming views, we've had 2,136,901 streaming views, or no, 2,172,491 streaming views, and in terms of downloads, about 1.4 million. So we figure that in terms of total views that we can count, 3.6 million views of videos, all of which have got the University of Rochester icon in the bottom corner for every nanosecond of that video, except I think when we're giving the photo credits at the very end. Now the downloaded ones, maybe people downloaded them and never watched them. Maybe they downloaded them and watched them more than once or shared them with friends. We actually had to shut somebody down who was running my course for pay in another country somewhere, using all my videos that they downloaded and charging people for the pleasure. So who knows how many views are out there? Is that a problem? Well, I'll come to that in just a minute. And then finally, the last box there is you have the number of students who have finished the courses, and squared there you have a number that says 17,305. That's the number of students who have done everything and achieved 70% or better in the course. 11,522 are students who did it the same thing, but with 90% or better. So if you look at the total numbers, our raw number for enrollments in courses that currently have finished is 171,672. The total number of certificates we've given away is 17,305. It's pretty clear that it's about a 10% completion rate, which is exactly what happens on Coursera as a matter of course across of all their courses. That's about what you'd expect. You might say, well, gosh, that's not very good. If only 10% of the people that took my course finished it, that would be a real mark of failure. But that's not the way people use these courses, and that's what I'll get to in just a minute. The part two has to do with the Coursera culture here, and some of the things you find out once you get into Coursera. First of all, students took ownership in the course material. This is enormously gratifying. You would have people posting things and saying things like, here's the way I do Covach's course. I watch the video until he mentions a song. I pause the video, I go on YouTube, I listen to the song, then I unpause the video and wait till he mentions another song. I stop the video, I listen, that's a 12-minute lecture. By the time sometimes I mention 150, 200 songs in a week. They're listening to all of them, or so they say. Would that my graduate students would have that level of dedication to actually listen to all of the music that gets, it's fantastic. It's probably a very small minority of people who actually do it at that level, but they're involved, and that's awesome. They started up Facebook groups for the course without asking for my permission, although I'm absolutely delighted that they've done so, to create a kind of a support group where they post videos for each other and comments and, this day in Beatle history and all kinds of things like that. It's a fantastic community of people that numbers in the thousands there. Somebody even started a Facebook group in Russia. I have no idea what they're saying about me because it's all in Cyrillic. But nevertheless, it gives you some idea of the ownership. When somebody is involved in something enough to create a Facebook group, and then other people join it, it tells you something about dedication. Again, Maybe it's because the course is good, maybe it's because they love the material. When you're teaching popular music, half the time the material does the selling for you. You don't really have to push it. So long as you represent it fairly, I think what has happened, the music has appeal all its own. Unlike, for example, my dissertation is on 12-tone music, and let me tell you, you got to push that real hard. This stuff just, this stuff, there's no problem. Access to music, as we said before, not really a problem. We talked about international discussion groups, but here's the thing. MOOC culture is a free culture. MOOC culture is like shareware. It's like downloading music on the internet. I got 190,000 people to hit that like button because it was free. If that had to pay $1, I'd be down to 19,000 best. You know, maybe 1% of those people would pay $1 for the course. It's interesting because it should give university professors pause to understand something. We like to believe that students are willing to pay for an education. But the real truth is they don't want to pay for the education. They want to pay for the credential. It's the credential they pay for. If the education is there without the credential, they don't want to pay for that. Now in music, it's a little bit different because in music, there's the immediate gratification of paying for a lesson in being able to play something. You know, there is the sort of immediate sort of skill level part of it. But most people who take courses want it to count for something so they can show it as a credential in a hope of being able to win, you know, a better job or a place in law school or a place in medical school or something like that. And if you take that away and you give them the course for nothing, but there's no credential that's associated with it, you can't turn around and charge them even the most minimal amount. I mean, if a good example of this is think about all the students that you teach, and if those students had to pay 1 penny for every song they downloaded or streamed or something, how would that affect their behavior? And most of them would just go, they would skip whatever that thing is that cost a penny and go on to the next free thing. And that's the kind of culture you've got here. Well, that's a very good question for people who, like the Coursera people who run this, because this is a for-profit company. So how does Coursera end up staying in business? For years, companies like Amazon, Google, people like that ran with no profit whatsoever. How do they profitize this? How does it, you know, a bunch of investment bankers put money behind Coursera. At some point, they're going to be going like, hey, you know, we need to get our $35 million back. Is something going to be happening sometime soon? They've offered a kind of a signature program where you can pay $69 to have your identity verified. So I have people, out of 40,000 students who took my Beatles class, about 200 of them signed up for the signature class where they paid $69 to have their identity verified. That's not very much. How does Coursera end up making money? Maybe they end up selling advertising like those YouTube videos. Before every little Covach video, you have to watch the first 5 seconds of something about a Buick, you know. Or maybe they do data mining. Think of all the really intelligent and accomplished people who are involved in these MOOCs. That's a lot of information about people. You could sell that could sell that part of it to advertising. After all, you've got their email addresses and something about where they're from and their age and various kinds of things like that. So maybe they do that. Udacity has, in the time since we've gotten into this, gotten out of the business and gone into professional training. So they will still do online courses, but for the Ford Motor Company, if they've got some sort of a thing that they want a bunch of employees to be able to learn, they'll create a MOOC for them, and then those employees will do that. So now it's really down to Coursera and edX.
What's the fiduciary relationship between a university, let's say you are,
Right.
And Coursera?
Well, we cover all the cost of producing the courses. I retain intellectual copyright over everything that I say. The University of Rochester retains copyright over the videos themselves. Coursera owns the platform and everything associated with the platform. We pay them nothing, they pay us nothing. We get a small piece of the signature thing. So you might wonder why a university would want to get involved in that. I want to get to that. It seems like, you know, if there's no money in it, why would this? If it's not revenue generating, why would you want to get involved? I'll get to that in just a minute. But let me just say that surprisingly, teaching a MOOC can be very, very gratifying. I mean, I have taught, I'm 55, I've been doing this for 30, 35 years. I've won teaching awards at 2 major universities. I've had a lot of really good students. I've been lucky to teach in really good programs. I've had some fantastic classroom experiences. But I have to tell you, in some ways, these MOOCs are like as gratifying as anything I've ever done. And it's weird because I've hardly met anybody that's in any of these courses face to face. But the level of feedback you get and a real sense that they're so grateful that you told them something that they think is so interesting about music they care about so desperately. The kind of vibe that comes back from that is enormously gratifying. So as a teacher, I haven't found it to be a kind of a faceless mass at all. I mean, I'm probably only hearing from a small sliver of the students who actually take it, but that's still a lot more students than I usually teach. If you go back to those numbers, you know, if I would teach at the University of Rochester 1,000 students in a year, so let's say that meant I was teaching 5 classes over the course of a year, each of them had 200 students in them. In order to teach all the students that ever enrolled, that would take me 192 years. All the students who ever showed up, 120 years. And all the students who got a certificate would take me close to 20 years. And that's if I was teaching 1,000. This gives you an idea. My enrollments as of the end of the semester were larger than the entire enrollment for the College of Art, undergraduate enrollment for the College of Arts and Sciences and Engineering at the University of Rochester for the same calendar period. In other words, there were more people who had enrolled in my MOOCs than had enrolled in all the courses we offer in the college. Now, they didn't all take the courses and all that kind of thing, but it gives you the idea of like how big the scale on which this thing goes. So let's get into why would you really want to do this? Well, I would say that I've already made the point that MOOCs do not replace college courses, though I think MOOC content may end up enhancing them and even transforming them. So having these good 10, 11, 12-minute lectures available by people who can lecture in a way that's engaging, if in fact it is engaging, can actually be a resource that we can use, maybe in the same ways we've used textbooks in the past. But my big point is that a MOOC is really an extensive series of public lectures. It's not really a course. It's an extensive series of public lectures. Universities send people like me out all the time to give a lecture to alumni on behalf of the University of Rochester. And this is an educated crowd, after all. By definition of being alumni, it means they've gotten some kind of degree here, right? And you give a talk, it's directed at an intelligent audience, and they feel that was fantastic to hear about that for about an hour. A MOOC is really just a big version of that, and that's the way to think about it. What does it do for you? It's a way of reaching out to the general educated public worldwide, and it's about promoting the university's image. If I would tell you, if you were a university administrator in charge of, spreading the university's image and the good news about all the work that we're doing here at the university, and I would tell you, what if I could get you an ad in which I could get 200,000 people internationally, most of whom have got either an earned master's, bachelor's, or PhD, to look at your university and say they like what you're doing, and I could give you that for free, would you take that deal? And most universities say, yeah. That's exactly what a MOOC does. It's a way of telling people that what we do here at the University of Rochester is of a high quality, and these are the kinds of things that we do. And the hope is that the revenue generation is not in charging them for the course, but it's in the general raising of awareness and reputation of the university, that good things come from that somehow. Nobody's quite sure what that good thing is going to be, but that's the hope, that this is more like an expense that comes out of your advertising budget than out of your teaching budget. And every university has an advertising budget. This is a very, very effective way of going forward. It also has the kind of citizenship aspect of more universities need to reach out beyond their ivory towers and explain to people that the kinds of things we do here are interesting, important, and engaging. Because too often people think of us as vocational places where it's about getting a degree so you can get a job, and this whole idea that people should think about ideas and things can be just intrinsically interesting and enriching in and of themselves is something that gets lost in this kind of vocational culture. Universities need to reach out. Here's a perfect way of reaching out. In terms of our students, think of this. Last Christmas, all across this country, 13-year-olds got iPads. We were just talking about cell phones. Those 13-year-olds, by the time they come to university, are going to want to do everything on that iPad or whatever the device is that they have 5 years from now, right? If we're not ready for content that engages that, we're just going to look like a bunch of old fuddy-duddies talking about the horse and carriage to them, right? You've got to, and you're not going to have good content by starting then. You have to start now developing that content. So when this thing finally, you've already done it. You've made some of the mistakes. You've figured out how to do this right. Not replace what you're doing, but enriching it. One way to enrich it is to do this thing that everybody's talking about these days, flipping the classroom. Now this is not a MOOC, but you could take the MOOC lectures. My MOOC lectures, when we get to the end, I'll show you a link where you can get all of these lectures on the Institute for Popular Music webpage. We don't advertise it because I want people to take the course, but the link is there. All the videos are there. You can use one of these lectures and assign them to students, and then instead of going through that material yourself, and I've tried to make it all family friendly, so there's nothing I say in the MOOC probably that's going to upset any administrator in any public school system anywhere. You can have them watch that at home and then come in and have a discussion about it. Or have them for extra credit, like we used to do SRA, do 2 or 3 of them and write up little reports on them and these kinds of things. These can be very effective this way, and it allows you then to flip the classroom so that the lectures do the videos do the lecturing, and you have a chance to do the discussion and haven't got to do as much of the lecturing. Of course, they have to watch the videos before you can have the discussion, and are they any more likely to watch a video than they are to read a textbook? Well, who knows? Yeah, somebody said, well, that flipping the classroom to me sounds like what we used to do with textbooks. We would assign the reading, and we'd expect that they would already know it, and we'd come in and talk about it. But anyway, this is one way in which MOOC content can help transform our classrooms. I think that hybrid courses are also the way that things are going to go. So think about it from this point of view. I am teaching a course in the Beatles where I have 60 students in that class. But I also have all these MOOC lectures on the Beatles. So I don't have the students watch those videos, they just get me teaching. So what I could do is I could meet with each of those 60 students, 30 on Tuesdays and 30 on Thursdays. And they could watch the videos, and then when we had the discussions, it would be in a room like this, where we could really have a discussion and not in the kind of big theater that I usually teach in. So we could use the MOOC content to enhance the quality of the class. You can also, and here's where the danger sign is, you can also use MOOC content to enhance the productivity. And this is a little bit hyperbolic for purposes of my own amusement, but let's just say that I don't know a single music theory professor who doesn't think if he or she taught every single semester of theory, that the curriculum wouldn't be better for it. They've all got their idea of how they want that curriculum to go. Well, with video content, that's entirely possible. You can have one person who usually teaches a university professor who usually teaches 4 classes a semester, teach 8, simply by replacing a lot of the lecture material with video material and still have the same number of contact hours. Well, if they can teach twice as many contact hours, it means you only need half as many faculty. And that's where this idea of sort of, people getting out of jobs, losing jobs is a problem. So from that point of view, hybrid courses are something to keep an eye on. But one thing is for sure the case, online learning and video lectures are here to stay. And there's really no going back. When it makes its way into school systems, into public schools, I don't know, maybe some of it's already there. But I'll tell you, there are a number of sort of cost-effective factors, and the textbook people are really sort of starting to get involved in this now, and we really have to keep our eyes on it and be ready for it. I just want to mention very quickly, because my time is running out here, just a couple of issues that it would be great if you could just think about as we go. I think there are probably 2 things we need to think about with regard to technology and teaching as we go forward in the next few years. The first one is accreditation in our culture. Currently, universities are the primary form of accreditation for people doing all kinds of things, not just teaching, but any kind of a degree really as a kind of a credential. And as I said before, students will pay for a credential, but mostly not for knowledge. Music lessons may be an exception. If we in universities and if we in schools start losing the ability to credential, we're losing one of the most important elements that allows our endeavors to be funded, because we make our money on our credentialing power. Why would we lose our ability to credential? Because in the land of Wikipedia, everybody is an expert. And we have to fight for the idea that there are certain kinds of expertise that are more valid and real than other kinds of expertise. If it is indeed a flat hierarchy where everybody is an expert, then that doesn't leave universities with much product to sell. Because what we're really selling are experts who give you information that leads to accreditation. But if the status of expertise is undermined, and the status of accreditation is spread out among a number of different things, including textbook companies like Pearson, before you know it, the entire structure upon which this is built flattens out, and it becomes like the music business in the world after digital music. You know, used to be big record companies in the 70s and 80s. Now those companies are all but dead, all but gone. And it happened because people could get this stuff for free and very easily. So as I say here, if universities lose the authority of expertise and almost exclusive authority to credential, there will be a fundamental disruption in teaching and scholarship. And I think all of us should play a role in making sure, unless you think that should happen, I don't think it should happen because I think it lowers the quality to the lowest common denominator. So my parting shot is I think it's crucial that we reach out beyond our campuses and enhance our presence in the culture at large. If there's any way we're going to get people to believe that universities really do something more than just vocational training, I think MOOCs can really play a role in reaching out. And in music theory, musicology, ethnomusicology, we call this public musicology, which is the idea of going to the public and designing things that are directly appealing to them. So from that point of view, I think MOOCs can play a large role. Thank you very much. We maybe have got time for 5 minutes for questions. And if anybody wants to see what the dashboard for the Coursera class looks like, what the instructor's dashbook look, if we get a break, I'd be happy to pull that up and sort of show you what it looks like from the instructor's point of view, what menus you see, where the videos are, where the various kinds of things are, if you're interested in seeing that. But let's take
Yeah. To whatever extent you're comfortable answering the question, I know you did talk about IP a moment ago. Can you review the intellectual property right for university, faculty, and Coursera when these types of situations?
Yeah, so I own the intellectual property right, which means that I can do these videos again for Arizona State, and the University of Rochester can't keep me from. In fact, the content of the videos is essentially what's in my textbook, and that's owned by Norton. So, I mean, they don't own that. What they own are the actual videos themselves. If you take my video and you mash it up with some other kind of thing, or you like put a duck voice in instead of me or something like that, strictly speaking, they should have the legal right to stop that from happening. You know, it probably has already happened and we haven't, but that's the part of it they own, right? Like the record company owns the recording, the artist owns the performance, and Coursera is simply a platform no different from Blackboard.
They don't own the course that's in their system? They
do not. They don't. They're selling the platform. And it's a lot of people think that where Coursera is going is to become a direct competitor with Blackboard. That's the best way to think about Coursera, is to think about them as this. I don't know how many of you know what Blackboard is, but in the university business, a lot of people use this website called Blackboard, where once the university subscribes to it, all of your courses are posted there, all of your student enrollments are posted there, all of your grading is done there. If you want to make things widely available to the students, syllabus, notes, PowerPoint slides that you just used in class, all that kind of thing, the students, once they enroll for the class, automatically have on their dashboard, they automatically have a button they can push to get to your class, and all of the material is there. So it becomes a kind of a virtual classroom kind of platform where you can post videos and all kinds of things like that, and that's very big. I mean, most classes now couldn't run without something like Blackboard.
More follow, and again, only to whatever you're comfortable answering. How does this work? So it's a University of Rochester course being offered in Coursera. How does this then work with like FTE generation and course load? Does it transfer? Is it like a separate thing? I don't understand how.
You mean with regard to me and my time?
Yeah, for University of
Yeah,
Rochester.
I don't get a cent to do this. So you might say, well, why do it? Well, one of them is I do have a textbook, and every single one of these videos is keyed to sections in my textbook, and these videos will be made available with the 4th edition of the book. So the hope is that people will be even more likely to adopt the book if they've got videos to go with it. They'd like to flip the classroom, but they don't want to make their own videos. You know? Again, the video starts to replace the textbook. So what happens is the video is the textbook is the reference.
So there's no credit generated for University of Rochester through the course? Or
That's right. That's right. There's not. This is totally off the books as far as any of that goes. That's why I say, you know, if you're a full professor, I'm a full professor, I feel like I'm relatively well paid. It's, you know, it's not really a big issue for me. But if you're a junior person, you've got to worry about your publication, various kinds of things like that, and you're going in a lot of different directions. You shouldn't do this. It's just too time consuming. You don't get anything out of it. You don't get money, you don't get publication credit, you don't get anything, really.
And John, it's my understanding that Coursera gets a cut from Amazon, books that are exclusively offered by Amazon that Coursera sends over to Amazon. Coursera actually gets a little bit of.
Well, and that would make a difference if people actually bought the book. I do not make the book required for the class. That should be entirely self-contained. I recommend that they buy the book, but I don't require it. And some do. The really dedicated ones will buy it. But we have not seen a big bump in book sales since this started. If anything, the bump in book sales come because people go out and buy the used copies up. And then when classes start, they've got to sell nothing but new copies. And so we see a little bit of bump that way. But it's not like I'm doing this class and I'm making tens of thousands of dollars in extra book sales. It doesn't work out that way. Again, it's a free culture. That's what we found out. If they got to pay $10 for a book, they just won't. Or they'll find a torrent site that will give them the entire book, the first edition of it, for nothing. That's good enough, you know. So that's the problem with the how do you profitize this culture?
If you say you find out about the course that starts July 6th, but you didn't start on July 6th, can you still?
Yes, yes. And especially if you don't care about taking any of the exams. Once the course is on, it's effectively open. Anybody can join until like the moment that the final day that the final exam is due. And then there's a grace period that we keep it open. So people can watch all the videos really.
That's what I was just going to ask. What happens when it's all over? Is it still available to look at?
It goes away for a while and then comes back. But if you think about using these materials in your own teaching, say, for example, if you happen to get into the course and download as many of them as you need, those are good forever. You download them right onto your hard drive and they're available. And then, you know, as far as the History of Rock thing goes, all of those videos are on my website. So if you want to take a picture of this with your cell phone, this address, Rochester EDU Pop Music Courses Rock-History-Part-1, even though Part 1 and 2 are both there, that's every video that's on Coursera, free to stream. Anybody who wants to use it is heartily encouraged to use it as much as they want to. You know, so maybe a 12-minute video on Elvis is all it takes to kind of set up a discussion in class, or some music making or something like that, where somebody gets up and kind of runs through it. And you could say, oh, isn't, you know, you could chat, but it doesn't take up too much time. Or you can have the kids do it before they come in class, that kind of thing. So maybe that's helpful, I don't know. Anyway, we should probably keep moving, so thank you very much for your attention. I appreciate it very much.